This is how I edit my cherry blossom photos to go from this to this. Come on, I'll show you how to do it. Cherry blossoms. They happen once a year for like a week or two and then they're gone. And everyone loves to take photos of them. But if you've ever taken photos of cherry blossoms, you might have noticed they don't look as pink in person as a lot of photo edits make them look. So this year I shot the cherry blossoms in High Park in Toronto, and I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna edit this photo into this. Now the look I'm going for here is still a more natural look in terms of the colors. Some people make the cherry blossoms really pink in their edits, and I don't wanna go that far, but we're still gonna add a little bit of enhancement. So here is our photo here in Lightroom. Now, the first thing I'm noticing is it's a little underexposed. We're gonna bring up the exposure just to try and get the skin tones where we want them. Now, we also have a sun flare coming into the lens, which I like. It washes it out a little bit, and there's also a lot of blown out highlights here, which we're probably not gonna entirely fix. But that's okay. The washed out look kind of works in this case. But you can see right off the bat, the cherry blossoms are like completely white. Now, some cherry blossoms are a little more pink, but sometimes they appear as like really pink, and I don't want to go for that full effect, but I do want to lean them a little bit more into that pink color. The first step towards that is setting my white balance. I'm going to go just a little bit cooler here. I'm going to try and get the temperature pretty spot on, but then I'm going to go a little bit more magenta than I otherwise would. Between this and this, I don't know why Lightroom's cropping the before photo, but that's what we started with. And so we're going a little more pink here. I don't want to go too far because I still want the skin tones to look pretty natural. All right, now let's add some contrast in here. And we have a lot of blown out highlights, so I'm gonna bring the highlights way down. Still pretty bright, so what I'm actually gonna do is drop the exposure back down, and then we're going to bring the exposure of her face back up using local adjustments. Blacks down just a tiny bit, just trying to get that histogram to be nice and even. I'm gonna add a little bit of texture. Don't like to add a lot of texture to portraits, but we'll just add a touch. And then for tone curve, we can maybe brighten up the mids just a little. Now for HSL, this is where we can get a little bit more creative. I wanna really hone in the color palette of this image and remove all the other colors. So I'm gonna start by shifting the greens and yellows, and then desaturating them. And same with the blues, we're gonna go a little more teal, kind of go for that slightly surreal look, but not too crazy, and then desaturate that as well. Don't want to do the reds or the oranges really too much because that's going to affect the skin tones. So then with color grading, you can add like a pink to the highlights, but I think it's going to add too much of a hue to our image, and I don't really want to ruin the skin tones, so I'm actually going to leave that out, and we're just going to correct it how we normally would. So I'm going to start by adding a warmer color into the midtones, probably like an orange like this. I always max out the colors first and then drag it back that just a tiny little bit. And then we're going to add in another color over here, maybe more of a purple color. Just that subtle change in colors. For detail, I'm going to leave the sharpening, but just drag up the masking. And then I'll add a slight vignette, see what that looks like. Maybe just a little bit. I'm actually going to change the crop of this in a little bit, and then let's try the vignette. Yeah, I'm just gonna add a little bit like that. And then I always like to check with the calibration, just see what it's gonna do to the image, see if it's gonna be something I like. Make the skin tones a little bit too red there, so I'm gonna leave that out. Now for some local adjustments. This is where we're gonna kind of correct our exposure here. It might have been a better idea to start with this before I added in the color adjustments, but we're just gonna see how it turns out. So the first one, I'm just gonna do a radial mask over all of her and bring up that exposure. Now our skin tones are more in that area that we want them to be. The next thing I'm going to do is create a gradient. I actually made a tutorial about this, but I want to get more of like a dreamy look out of these photos, and I did a whole thing of talking about this, but I'm going to take a radial mask, invert it, and then I'm going to decrease the clarity, and it's going to create kind of this glowy effect around her, but still keep her contrast proper. Now I'm going to use one of Lightroom's smart mask things and select her skin tones here. Select your person, and then select facial and body skin, create that mask. And then I'm just gonna do a little bit of softened skin here and also brighten it up a tiny bit more. You can see the amount that it puts on there is ridiculous. So we're gonna back that way off from 100 to like maybe 20. So this is before our local adjustments and what we have now. It's definitely got more of like a dreamy, hazy kind of vibe to it, which I kind of like. But our cherry blossoms are still kind of this whitish color. I'm gonna do one more mask on her, and I'm gonna do her eyes because she has these nice blue eyes, but because we're shooting backlit here, it's not really lighting up the way I want to. We still got some detail there. So I'm gonna select the eyes with a brush, just the irises, and Lightroom has its iris enhance thing. We can try that, maybe brighten them up a tiny bit more. It's very easy to make this look unnatural, so Just be careful. All right, now let's see what we can do about these cherry blossoms. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a general brush over the area of the blossoms. Now this is gonna be a rough brush because it would be such a pain to try and individually perfectly brush each of these petals. Once we have our adjustment like that, I can create a range mask using luminance range and just select the highlights. And then I'm gonna expand it out a little bit. And then I'll set it to subtract and invert it. And then that way it's just taking away from the brush we already have there. And now you can see our mask is pretty much just the cherry blossom selected. So with this, I'm gonna play with the temperature and tint to add just a little bit of pink to the cherry blossoms without, again, we don't wanna go overboard with this, just like that. Now, let me just double check the mask here. So if we look at before and after, we're just kind of adding a pink tint to them. Another way to do this, if I just set these back to 0, is we can use the color selection here and just tint everything a whole color for like this pinkish color, and then just dial that back a bunch, just like that. So now we're getting kind of that like fairy dream world feel, but we're not going over the top. Some people, I've seen a lot of edits where people like really push them and they're like a color like this, like a very purple color, kind of like that. And that's not the vibe. Just because I know they can look a little pink, but they're never like that purpley pink. And there we go. This is what we started with. And this is where we ended up. Quite a big shift in the colors within the image, but the final edit doesn't look so fake that it couldn't be real. At least I think. Let me know in the comments, is this too much editing or not enough maybe? But that's all I have for you in this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.